In a world built on ambition and greed, the evolution of debt, how it transformed from a social lifeline into the most profitable product in human history, uncovers a hidden chapter in financial history, a story of power, manipulation, and lessons the world refused to learn. From the corridors of Wall Street to the boardrooms where nations are shaped, this narrative explores the rise, the fall, and the silent consequences that changed how money moves. Every moment builds towards revelation, how decisions made in pursuit of profit reshaped economies, altered lives, and defined the meaning of value itself. As the truth unfolds, one question remains. Did we master money, or did money master us? Before currency, before empires, there was debt. But it was not the cold, impersonal ledger we know today. In the Fertile Crescent of Mesopotamia, some 5,000 years ago, debt was a social fabric, a thread of trust woven between neighbors. It was a promise recorded on clay tablets, a loan of seed for the next harvest, a helping hand extended in times of famine. This was debt born of necessity, a tool for communal survival. Its purpose was not to generate profit, but to ensure the continuity of life itself. The ancients understood its inherent danger. They knew that unchecked obligation could fracture a society, and so they created a release valve, periodic debt forgiveness, a jubilee. Kings would wipe the slates clean, restoring balance and preventing a permanent underclass of debtors from emerging. It was a remarkably sophisticated system, recognizing that for society to thrive, its members must be free, not shackled by the past. But as civilizations grew, so did the nature of their obligations. The Romans, architects of law and conquest, codified debt into an instrument of absolute power. What was once a relationship of trust became a legally enforceable contract, backed by the full might of the state. Failure to pay was no longer a communal problem to be solved. It was a personal crime to be punished. A defaulted loan could cost a man his land, his freedom, and even his life. The concept of asterisk nexum asterisk bound a debtor into servitude, effectively making them the property of their creditor until the obligation was met. Here, debt transitioned from a social tool to a mechanism of control. Simultaneously, a moral and religious backlash brewed. Across the Abrahamic faiths, the practice of charging interest usury was condemned as a sin, an exploitation of the vulnerable. This created a paradox. Economies needed capital to grow, but the very act of profiting from lending was seen as immoral. The tension would simmer for centuries, forcing lenders into the shadows and giving rise to complex financial arrangements designed to obscure the simple, profitable act of charging interest. The dawn of the modern age brought debt out of the shadows and placed it at the very heart of global expansion. During the 17th and 18th centuries, the age of discovery was financed not by kings' treasures alone, but by vast, intricate networks of credit. The Dutch and British East India Companies, the world's first multinational corporations, were built on borrowed money. They issued bonds, took loans, and extended credit to fund fleets that sailed to the far corners of the earth, extracting resources and building colonial empires. Debt was no longer just a local transaction. It was the fuel for global commerce and conquest. This commercialization trickled down. As trade economies flourished, credit became a normalized part of life for merchants, artisans, and even landowners. The taboo of usury slowly dissolved, replaced by the logic of the market. Personal lending, once fraught with moral hazard, was now simply a business transaction, a calculated risk for a calculated return. Debt had been institutionalized. The 20th century, however, would take this institution and industrialize it. The post-World War II economic boom in America created a new phenomenon, the mass consumer. For the first time in history, millions of ordinary people had disposable income and an insatiable desire for the goods rolling off assembly lines, cars, refrigerators, televisions. But desire often outpaced income. And into that gap stepped a revolutionary invention, the credit card. First introduced by a diners club in 1950, it was a simple piece of plastic that decoupled the act of buying from the act of paying. It was a masterstroke of financial engineering, transforming debt from a discrete, negotiated event into a continuous, ever-present line of credit. Banks quickly realized the immense potential. They began to mass-produce debt, marketing it not as a burden, but as a form of financial freedom and convenience. The system was designed for profit, built on the steady stream of income from interest payments, late fees, and annual charges. Debt was no longer something one fell into. It was something one was actively sold. The borrower's obligation had become the bank's reliable asset. This transformation reached its apex in the late 20th century with the financialization of debt. Wall Street, driven by an unyielding quest for new sources of profit, devised its next great innovation, securitization. The concept was as simple as it was dangerous. Instead of a bank holding a loan on its books, it could bundle thousands of individual debts mortgaged, car loans, credit card balance, and sell them as a single financial product, a security. These mortgage-backed securities and collateralized debt obligations were then traded on global markets, sliced into complex derivatives, and sold to investors from London to Tokyo. Debt had been abstracted, detached from the real people and real homes it represented. It became a number on a screen, an asset to be leveraged and speculated upon. This global casino of debt created unimaginable wealth for a select few, but it was built on a foundation of sand. When the American housing market faltered in 2007, the entire system cracked. The 2008 financial crash was the inevitable result. It exposed how the world as financial architecture had become addicted to a product derived from the obligations of ordinary people, revealing a systemic risk that threatened to bring the global economy to its knees. The inequality was stark. The profits had been privatized, but the losses were socialized, paid for by taxpayers around the world. Today, we live in the world that crash created. Debt is no longer a feature of the economy. It is the economy. It is woven into the fabric of modern existence, from the student loans that finance education to the government bonds that fund our infrastructure. It is the credit card used for daily groceries, the mortgage that secures a home, and the buy now, pay later promise that fuels digital commerce. Our access to this world is governed by a single three-digit number, the credit score. This score, an algorithmic judgment of our financial past, dictates our future. It determines whether we can rent an apartment, get a job, or buy a car. It is a digital gatekeeper, and the system is inherently unequal. The wealthy, with access to prime loans and low interest rates, can use debt to build more wealth. The poor, relegated to subprime lending and predatory interest, find themselves trapped in a cycle of obligation where a small loan can balloon into a lifetime of payments. Debt has become the primary mechanism through which inequality is not only created but actively sustained. What began as a gesture of communal support has been systematically engineered into the most profitable and pervasive product in human history. The fundamental purpose of debt has been inverted. Its original function was to help. Its modern function is to control. The individual is no longer merely a borrower. In the intricate machinery of modern finance, the borrower's future stream of payments has become the product itself. This transformation was not accidental. It was the result of a deliberate centuries-long process that normalized what was once a sin, commodified what was once a promise, and sold it back to us as a form of freedom. The moral architecture of society was quietly re-engineered, recasting debt from a moral failing to a financial necessity, and ultimately to a source of immense profit. In this new world, power is wielded not by armies, but by algorithms and credit ratings. As we look to a future of digital currencies and decentralized finance, we must ask whether these new technologies will liberate us from this system or merely create more efficient, more invisible, and more pervasive forms of control.